Okay, hello. How's it going there, Katrina?
It's going good, thank you. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. It's really great to have you here. As you know, you've kind of got almost like a job that spans two amazing things. As if one wasn't good enough already with working with Lego, but not only are you involved with Lego House, but you're also involved with the Lego Masters series as one of the producers. So I'd love to talk to you. I guess the theme that we're going to explore is essentially about the endless possibilities of play. But I'd love to just start from the top a little bit with a little bit of your background and how you got into creativity, play, working with children, and really just like completely changing the perspective of what people can do with play.
That was a very broad question. So I've always been really fascinated with storytelling and working on stories for children, whether it's through publishing, whether it's through play experiences, whether it's through TV, films, or whatever. For me, what's really exciting is when a story really makes a difference, and you really are able to come across with an important message to the world and use this medium for that. And after several years of working with TV shows, actually a lot about minority communities, I started at Lego working with stories in publishing, also working on a lot of fiction, a lot of nonfiction. We also did a lot of exciting user-generated content where we got kids to make their own stories and, to really kind of dive into what is storytelling and how can you be creative with writing. And that was really fun. And then when Lego House suddenly came along, this was a great opportunity to really explore play and work with different ways of play.
So maybe there's just one thing we should take a little bit of a pause on, because actually it caught me out when I first flew out to Lego for the first time, is that there's of course Legoland, the theme park, and Lego House is not that. So could you just like break it down and explain the differences?
Yeah. So Legoland is really a fun fair that it celebrates the Lego bricks. It celebrates all the themes. It showcases like these amazing miniature lands where you can see what you can build out of Lego. But it really is not a lot about play experiences. It's about fun fairs. It's about having a good time with your family, eating ice creams, and we have those in many, many places. We have them in Disneyland and all around the world. We know what fun fairs and roller coasters are like. So what Lego House wanted to do was really celebrate the endless possibilities of the brick and really dive into what is play all about. So in that sense, it's much more of a science center, really engaged to play and different ways of play.
Yeah, I mean that was the thing that really sort of surprised me, is that obviously, as you know, there's many things that are interesting about London, but I think one of the things that you can honestly say on an international level is that it has a ton of free world-class museums. So the V&A, the Natural History Museum, and obviously the Science Museum. And it kind of feels, for anyone who hasn't taken the trip to Billund, which I can appreciate because it is truly in the middle of nowhere, and it is like Lego or nothing. That's not an insult. That's the case as well. Nodding in agreement. Thank you. But it almost feels like the same level of quality that the Science Museum does, but for play. And I think Lego House, for me, I went in there, and of course it's a lot about the brick, but it's so much more than that. The technologies that it brings together, of course, in the name of like inspiring the future builders of tomorrow, as we often say. But I think it's more than just basically, oh, have we got some virtual reality and have we got a little bit of image recognition? I mean, could you give us a few examples for people who don't know of where it does something really quite amazing, sometimes with the simplest, but sometimes the most cutting edge technology out there?
Yeah. So when you look at Lego House, what's interesting is that it's based on the concept that when you play, you're happy. And when you're happy, this is when you're ready to learn. This is when you're ready to learn new skills about the world. And that's why Lego House has really studied the different ways of play patterns. and divided the house into 4 different sections. And these are represented by different colors. So you have like the red section, which is all about developing free creativity. So this is just about any kind of creativity, any ways of free expression. And all these experiences there are just dedicated to expressing yourself as an artist, as an individual. Then we have another section, which is all about where play develops the cognitive skills. So that's the sort of logical ways of thinking. And in Lego House, this is showcased through robots, through building a city. And in this sense, this is where you can learn about how to develop these logical skills through playing. There are 2 more sections, and the other one is developing social skills. And in Lego House, you'll see that there's different experiences just dedicated in developing social skills. And the last one is emotional skills. So we have like the 4 sections, which is free creativity, cognitive skills, social skills, and emotional skills. And really what Lego House is about is deep diving into these different play patterns and really exploring how you can develop these skills in a fun way.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's one of those things where I think as well, the bit that surprises me is that, you know, working as a technologist, and as I was when I was at Lego as a technology scout, is that it felt like a lot of the time you have to look towards sci-fi for inspiration for technology. And sometimes sci-fi can get a little bit dystopian, but I actually feel Lego House, truly, it's so positive and upbeat. And I just wonder, like, what was that journey that it took to make it feel so inspiring, yet also so optimistic about the future of our relationship with technology?
Yeah, so I think, based on these like core values of and looking into play, what was really important was to make play also interactive. And that's where the digital sort of layer came in. And that's what we've always called it. That's what I was dedicated into, was kind of ensuring that there was this digital layer and that somewhere new technologies could emerge with the physical building and that it was somehow a seamless experience. So you weren't like focused only on building and then suddenly the digital experience was now something else. The idea was to merge everything together so it became one, it became like new and exciting. And that's where we had experiences, or we still have experiences like what's it called? Do you remember what it was called? No, I can't remember. The one where you're building a city builder. Yeah. So as an example, we have the city builder where you have to build a city and you're working with that interactive layer. And that was really an exciting journey to really find out how to use new scanning technologies of the brick and work in a really controlled environment. I think that was the greatest asset, was that in a museum, you can really control the lighting, control the physical environment, and then make the most of it.
And I think that's always the thing that's a little bit difficult, is sometimes when you've got to do everything at home in a play set. I mean, I don't think I'm breaching anything confidential here, but certainly with some of the early Lego play sets, some of the first attempts at things like augmented reality and things like this, it's very difficult because the lighting conditions are imperfect. Whereas, you know, in a museum-esque environment, you can floodlight something perfectly, so there's no difficult shadows. So it means that the experience is optimal, whilst, dare I say it, the technology catches up. I'm sure in 5 years' time, we won't even be worried about lighting in our smartphones. It'll just deal with it. It'll probably be using AI, better processors, better lenses. But I think this is the thing that I've often said to so many people who are in technology is, you know, go to Lego House, because it honestly is such an incredible showcase of really great stuff just being given a very exciting and tangible. I mean, the fact that you can interact with almost every exhibition is just extraordinary.
Yeah.
I guess I was going to ask you, I was going to ask you, where do you think it's gone? Like, you know, obviously you've got a really interesting connection of the Bjarke Ingels group who actually designed it, but what other industries have been inspired? Because it's not just kids, right, who turn up at Lego House.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it is an experience for people of all ages, people who really need to be inspired and feel they can express themselves. Obviously, there are many fans of Lego who really love the place and who see it as, the haven. This is supposed to be the mecca for the brick, because this is where you can engage in experiences, and also really there is also a chance to showcase some of these amazing builders and their work in Lego House. But at the same time, it's also been inspired by people who've been really working with cutting edge technology and really trying to look at how can new technologies support the building experience. And I think if we look at the experience where it's about making a fish, it's called Fish Designer. What was quite interesting about that experience is that you could have gamified it much more. You could have implemented even more technology. But what we wanted to do was to also ensure that children are still building. So there's an experience where basically you build a fish, you scan it, and it comes to life on a big screen. And here, there was a lot of research about looking into how could you maybe gamify it once the fish came alive. But what happened was that if you didn't do too much, the kids actually go back and build more fish. And then, seeing that sparkle in the eye that, oh, look at my build, it came to life, I want to build something more. It's working with those kinds of experiences and seeing that kind of joy and pride of having built something and wanting to do more and more. And this is, I think, a good example of this integration where a new technology meets the physical play, and it's working in a really dynamic and positive way.
No, I mean, I think that's fascinating, and I love that example. I'm conscious that you were just about to make a point, so if you haven't lost your train of thought.
I think that was it. Sorry, yeah.
Oh well, that's good. I guess in that case, it would just be interesting to maybe get into a little bit this. We talked a little bit before we started the call of just like the relationship between art and play and things that were somewhat sort of not quite as serious as always being motivated by a financial imperative to understand new technology. And I sort of wondered, what were your reflections on seeing how new technology both enters Lego House, but also what it inspires going forward?
Well, I think the way technology sort of inspired what it is right now is that you see how it supports the building experience, how it kind of enhances the experience, while still also allowing you to focus on the physical build. But I think in the future, it also really showcases how these interactive layers can make an experience really dynamic, can add another layer of your experience, also adding the memories of what you've created, so that when you go home, you're still able to relive what you've done and continue that journey, so that you take all this that you get from Lego House, the whole experience, you take it home, and then you can continue this journey. And I think the whole idea of the map stations, where you capture all your creations during the day and that you're able to take it home, I think this is also a really important aspect of it, that you're able to continue the journey of endless possibilities of play.
Absolutely. And I guess that's something which is easy to talk about, of saying, how do you make play live on beyond the moment? But actually it's quite difficult when you usually go to a theme park. Let's say you go on a roller coaster, there's a little bit of and now what when you get home? I mean, if you're from a very creative family and people are capable of building stuff, it might be that you try and build a roller coaster, and that's cool. But I think what's impressive about it is that you seem to be able to break it down so that it's very accessible. You don't have to be someone who's in a so-called creative industry in order to just keep enjoying it. So I guess where I was going with that is what do you think the relationship, and it doesn't have to always relate to the fact that we're in a lockdown situation at the time of recording this, but what do you think our relationship is with, the increasing digitization of museums? You see sort of virtual galleries popping up. Do you think this is eroding the physical experience, the in-person experience, or do you think this is just complementing it and taking it to new levels?
Well, I would say that that using new technologies and the whole interactive layer in museums is and should be enhancing the overall experience. Also, to tap into the newer generations who want to experience the museums. I mean, if it's if it's not adding to the experience, then really one shouldn't be doing it. Then the old style museums work just as well. I also enjoy many museums without a digital layer, and I think if really the digital layer isn't complementing it, then there's no point. So I think as long as it has that story message and it complements it, then I think that there's so much possibility to look into in the future of these experiences.
Yeah. And I guess, forgive me, this is probably asking, like asking, you know, what's your favorite child, but is there any favorite exhibitions that you think that was just the best when that came together?
Well, of Lego House or in general?
Well, either. Go
Okay,
for Lego House and go for in general,
obviously,
actually.
I mean, one of the most fun projects on Lego House was working with the Mini Chef restaurant, where
So cool.
it's like a crazy combination of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory meets healthy, funky food meets the Lego building experience. And I think here it was really exciting because not only do you get to build your meal, there's a whole story about the minifigs being in the kitchen and using technology to tell that story that actually in the kitchen, the minifigs are making your food and they send it to a Lego box, which goes down to a conveyor belt. And that's why you have 2 robots delivering the food. That whole experience, I think, is probably one of my favorite ones because it touches on so many levels. It's got the whole building experience. It's got the concept of what is a healthy food, in a family restaurant. It's got the whole story of the robots, the minifigs, and everything comes together in a meal where we all enjoy it together.
And I think that's what's so nice, isn't it? You touched on something which I think is really, really hard to do, having had to go through some of that journey myself creatively, is that people assume, you know, oh, well, I'm just creating a game or an experience and it's going to be fun for all the family. That is so easy to say and so hard to do, that you can have, you know, young kids all the way through to grandpa and granddad connected over something and all taking away different things. I mean, I honestly struggle for brands that aspire to that and do it well. And it's kind of like Pixar is about, you know, it really does feel quite hard to access that. But I mean, can you, without sort of giving away the secret sauce, I guess, but can you break down a little bit how Lego House manages to truly cater so universally to things?
I think the key is always to think about having fun and, again, the endless possibilities of the brick, and not allowing yourself be limited by any kind of restrictions. When we worked on the restaurant, it was a little bit, you know, well, why would you put hot food in a plastic box and put it down a conveyor belt and allow it to get cold? Yeah, from a logical perspective, that doesn't make sense. But from the story angle, the fact that the minifigure is too small to carry the food, and that's why they have to carry it on a massive conveyor belt that goes down a spiral, and then it manages probably to get a bit colder than the perfect temperature. But, you know, really holding on to what is the story that you want to say with this experience. And I think that really was crucial to working with the Lego House and the whole experience is, you know, always bearing that in mind. One of the other things that we worked a lot with was that everywhere you go in Lego House, you should always be within reach of Lego bricks. So wherever you go, wherever you put your hand, there should always be bricks within 1 meter of where you are. And, you know, having that, you know, being aware that that's really something you always have to bear in mind. And I think also because nobody had done Lego House before, there was also there was an openness in the team to always fail. I mean, every time we did something, there was never a sense, oh, you should really have done things differently, because nobody really knew what was right. So there was an assumption, well, it might not work every time you tested things. And if it didn't work, you would do it again and again and again. And there was an incredible positive spirit to always keep going at any moment. And I think that's really what I noticed. The essence of it was that people had this positive approach to just keep trying, even if some things didn't work out, and finding new solutions all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I almost feel that's one of the most infectious qualities about Lego is that it does have that willingness to fail. I mean, I'm sure there's, if there's a few people who work at Lego, there's times when it feels very perfectionist. So I'm not going to be like, worshipping and sycophantic about this, but ultimately there is still, when you look at the case history, that there are so many failures, but actually it seems to endure the best of it, and it seems to come through the other side. And I'm reminded of, I remember watching the documentary, and I saw how Bjarke Engel's group, he was, trying to get for anyone who doesn't know, the outside of the Lego bricks is covered in ceramics. And someone who's done this for 6 years, it's actually extraordinary that they've got these huge tiles about this thick, which then go around a 90-degree corner. And I can tell you that that's not trivial at all. That's like really, really the worst thing you could ask a ceramicist to do. And yet, clearly, you must have inspired something in those technicians, in those designers, in those architects to say, yep, we're going to keep pushing for this, even if it has, which it will have had, huge failure rate in getting those right. So I guess,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Again, and I think that's where it is a bit cliche to always go back to the Lego motto, only the best is good enough. But that is also the essence of Lego House, that there was this constant desire to just really make the best of the best every time. And it had to really reflect what the brick is about and reflect the endless possibilities. So it had to go down to the tiny details, also including those ceramic bricks, which had to conform to what the brick looks like. And every experience, every detail had to conform to only the best is good enough, while still allowing people to fail and trying new things and trying again and again to make it work. And it's that combination of talent and a combination of passion and desires to just reach that top level, I think, that really drove Lego House. Yeah.
So I guess if it's not too much of a pivot, I guess you could say Lego House, of course, worked closely with the architects to achieve this. But then, of course, you've been involved in another great partnership, which is working with the production of Lego Masters. And you can appreciate that I've worked a little bit with the BBC and most recently Channel 4. And I know that it's actually an incredible, coming together of different disciplines. Everybody would like to think that the word creativity is universally understood, but it's not. It means different things to Lego. It means different things to a company trying to make great TV. So could you tell me a little bit about what was that journey from the inception of the idea through to really understanding? And of course, the second series is doing things all different again. So could you take us through that journey?
Yeah, so Lego Masters started in the UK at a show which is really about celebrating creativity and building, and really showcasing what can Lego fans do, because it is about being the Lego master. So you really have to be able to build incredible things, and that's why people are selected for the show, because it is ultimately who is going to be the best and the Lego master of the show. And what the show really also covers is, how far can you take this building experience? How far can you take your creativity? And it's also a lot about teamwork, because at the end of the day, a lot of play and a lot of building is about building as a team. And I think Lego Masters is really also a lot about how do these different teams work together under time pressure, and the whole creative process where you experience these blocks, you experience frustrations, you experience that sometimes your build actually falls apart maybe 10 minutes before you're supposed to finish. And what do you do in these cases? And this is where Lego Masters really kind of looks into the sort of creative process of building and what it's all about.
I mean, it's kind of a little bit, unique in the way that it does this, and that I've always been struck about the fact that it's something that's almost, on paper, it should be boring, right? I mean, just watching people make stuff out of bricks, wouldn't you just be like, all right, get to the end? So, I mean, it's interesting that we started this discussion about creating stories and narrative, but how do you actually do that from something which on paper just doesn't sound like it would have a lot of drama and a lot of dynamic and indeed a lot of backstory to it?
Well, I think for Lego Masters, the way I think the characters, the people who are building, they bring so much to the show. I think what's interesting about the cast and the way that the studios are working with the contestants is that they're so diverse. It's such a diverse range of people you see, and that's really exciting for TV to see all these different types of people. It can be couples, it can be father, son, it can be two young boys who are just best friends. It can be so many different combinations of people. And what they have in common is that they love building and they love working together as a team. But obviously, all these different teams and these ranges of personality, that's where they bring their stories to life. Because once they get their brief on whatever challenge they have to do, this is where the story really starts. And this is where you see how do people react, how do they solve this creative problem under time pressure, and what is the end result. And I think it's that journey in each episode. Every time they're briefed with a new challenge, how do they go about it? And sometimes it's full of surprises, sometimes it's full of disappointments. And this is really where the story comes to life. And it's all about the creative process and how to get there.
Mm. And I mean, I guess it's sort of, without sort of sounding like I'm stating the obvious here, it's kind of interesting that a lot of Lego, traditionally had been quite a solo experience. It's then moved into spaces like First Lego League, adopting it sort of to essentially make robots compete. And indeed, Lego Masters is somewhat of an aesthetic and an intellectual competition, you could say, as well as the technical skill. So what would you say what is the purpose of having meaningful competition as far as developing the builders and the creatives of tomorrow?
That is a very good question, Jude. So I think the competition adds that element of drama and incentive to kind of want to know who is going to be the Lego Master, and that drive. That's the narrative layer of it. So I think that it's essentially about really, performing your best. Again, it goes back to only the best is good enough. And how can you achieve this in this short amount of time against these other groups who are also equally talented? What we do see in the show is that there's a lot of support for each other. There's not necessarily the sort of sense that they just, obviously everyone wants to win, but there's also a great kind of compassion for each other. And the teams that don't get selected to continue the episode, they get hugs from the rest of the groups, and everyone feels for them. And there is this mutual respect that what they have in common is building and expressing themselves through the brick. And that's really where you could say that that's where the extra layer comes in.
Mm. Because I think in many ways it would be easy to sort of, I think sometimes the mistake that you can make when you look at something as universal as Lego is that sometimes you think you can look at one aspect and say, well, maybe Lego City isn't for me, and maybe Lego Friends isn't right, or maybe Technic, or whatever it is. But it feels like it's so broad that you can find your niche, you can find your community. And indeed, none more so now than digitally. The phrase adult fans of Lego has really allowed a whole section of people who might never usually have considered themselves either too grown up for Lego bricks, or indeed that, maybe it wasn't something that they had initially associated with a younger part in their life. So I guess my question is really like, how have you seen the role of media and online platforms help creativity for something that is both a physical brick, but also a digital community?
Well, I think the fact that you see all these groups being challenged in these creative situations, I think it's Lego Masters is a lot about getting a challenge and finding out, how do I solve this brief? And this is something we as professionals also have to solve on a daily basis. It's also something that kids at school have to solve. You get a brief and you get a certain time, and how do you solve it? And I think that using that sort of entertainment to really showcase this process is really fun, and it opens up these windows to an area of Lego that you might not otherwise see, and to these personalities that are building these things, and what really goes on, and how difficult, but also how much fun it is to be able to express yourself with the brick. I mean, some of the creations are just amazing, and the time pressure and the things that people had to do in this short amount of time really is incredible. And I think that this is where it's exciting that the camera can really capture this form of creativity and these individuals who are so passionate about building and about expressing themselves through building. I think this is really the most fun bit of Lego Masters, and using TV for that.
And I mean, of course, it's worth saying for anyone who hasn't watched it, it's not just in the UK. It's been syndicated is the word, or franchised. Yeah. I don't know what the word is, all over the world. And certainly America, it's a very different flavor. And I think this is something that again, if we could discuss a little bit, is that it's quite unusual for a brand to have the ability to be at once global and at the same time local. And so the UK Masters series feels very different to the American and vice versa. So how did you basically retain what was core to Lego, but at the same time make it feel culturally relevant?
Well, making a global series that has to have that local impact is definitely a complex process. We obviously have a lot of it comes from the broadcaster behind it and the production studio, who we are working really closely with, and through Endemol Shine, who's the umbrella organization as the main distributor of all these of the global rollout. So what we have is we had the startup in the UK where it engaged a lot of children and adults, and then looking at Australia, which has this cinematographic approach and working in a very different way only with adults. Those two are very, very different and have different types of hosts. And that's really how the show has evolved from each territory, because each production is a separate one and they have to appeal to their local country. We've just recently aired a show in Holland where everything is in Dutch. It was seen by 1/10 of the Dutch population during these times. So that's very exciting. But obviously, the way you have to roll out a global series like this, you need talent from the local communities. You need talent from the TV industry. And that's really also what defines each local show being quite different to each other.
And it's quite remarkable that, again, we're seeing this shift. And if it's not taking us in too much of a different tangent, but I guess should we say the connecting joint would be that Lego spent quite a bit of time trying to empower kids to make their own productions, as it were. They've had Lego Movie Maker, which is quite a recent thing, but actually there's been earlier iterations that have existed, even before the Lego Movie. And so stop motion, there was a Steven Spielberg one, for example, back in, I don't know when, was it probably 90s or something like this? But I guess my question is really, where do you see kids running with the future of play in a global sense? Because you're inspiring them to sort of embrace a global audience. So where do you see that going?
Well, I think a show like Lego Masters really, the hope is that it really inspires not only kids but adults to really go out and build. You don't and it can be building at all kinds of levels. Creativity doesn't have to be the amazing master builder with 8 hours to and And obviously in Lego Masters, you have millions of bricks at your disposal. And we see Lego designers, they also have what we call the brick library, where they have any brick element that they want at their disposal. And obviously when you're at home, you might not have 1 million bricks to choose from. So that's, again, a different experience. But the hope is that when you've watched these shows where you do see people failing, people winning, people succeeding, people being frustrated in the creative process, it really goes to show that, you can do anything with the brick. You can tell any story you want. And it's really yourself that puts your limits. Obviously, the amount of bricks you have really also determines how big you can go. But that's not to say that a small build with a few bricks with more limitations isn't an amazing creation. So it's like really, you can really do anything. And it's only really your own imagination that puts the limit.
So I appreciate we've been talking very sort of, in big terms, but I guess just coming down to you as an individual for a minute, what were some of your favorite builds? Are you someone who loves the limited palette challenges, or are you like the blow us away with anything?
Well, I think I personally really like working with limitations. And what I really like is when you have challenges and when you're halfway through the challenge, a new challenge comes up. And you see the look in people's eyes when they realize that what they've been doing halfway will change. And this whole idea of working with really, really sort of restricted briefs and then having it change and seeing what evolves from that, I think is really exciting. But at the same time, I also think it's great when you see like more elaborate builds about playgrounds and the fun fairs, where you really see how far can the builders go in telling a story of a fun fair and those kinds of builds. Yeah.
That's definitely, no, I mean, it's really insightful to sort of like get a picture of how the process and the journey of creating something like that. I guess one of the other sort of processes that I thought, if it's coming back to Lego House again, it's so interesting that one of the things that strikes me is that you have the injection molding machine, pumping out these little red bricks. And I think it's one of those things that it's all too easy to forget. How is it these things actually come to be? And I think, of course, the adult fans of Legos, the nerds, myself included, absolutely love seeing those things. But it's a little bit, I guess, the analogy between kids not appreciating where milk comes from or where the vegetables are grown. I kind of feel there's something quite honest about Lego going, yeah, this is how we get started. So how do you think using stories and things like this, how do you think you engage children to not just look at the end product on the shelf, but the journey? I mean, as we're obviously going through a time of sensitivity and awareness to resources, to scarcity. So where do you think the journey will go as time goes on?
Well, that's a very good question. Obviously, our core brick is the 2x4, and that's obviously what everyone always thinks about when they think, what is the process? It starts from plastic and goes through molding machines and then comes out. But at the same time, we have like such a diverse range of elements that are all being created. We have the minifigs, and there's a lot of research going into how can we make sustainable play experiences in the future. And that's obviously something that'll be really exciting to see what that journey will be like. But I think, what's interesting is that you can make things from just a 2x4 brick. You can also make things from a minifig, which already tells a big story. And the combination of certain things, that's really where the journey starts. And really, it is, again, down to the individual's imagination. How far can they take 3 bricks, 6 bricks? How many possibilities are there? And what stories do you want to say? Or what kind of creations do you want to make? And that journey really also depends on the individual and their imagination.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, I think it does. I guess in some ways it's it's funny that I was just in a conference call with a bunch of students, and obviously not to make this whole thing always about lockdown and COVID, But it struck me as it's kind of interesting that even before all this happened, many people at Lego in the organization are already quite acclimatized to working remotely. And so, as much as that we're having a pain point because people are having to go in just for a baptism of fire to get used to it, I kind of wonder a little bit like, how will children, do you think, collaborate online? Do you think it is going to be one of these things, not to drop any particular brand, but whether they are using Slack or Microsoft Teams or Trello or Basecamp, do you think kids will actually end up saying, we want to do this really crazy build and we've got 10 different other designers from all around the world? Do you think that will become the new norm?
Well, I think in these times, obviously, there is a sense of restriction that we all we're limited, we're working in a different way to what we're used to. But the flip side is obviously that restrictions, they also allow you to really focus on all alternatives, on new solutions, and working in different ways. And this is where teamwork on social media or whatever programs you have become really, really important. And so rather than looking at the negative sides of, because everything is different and this is not how we're used to, it's really about embracing that and looking at how can we work within these restrictions? How can we, again, be creative? I think, have you paused?
So I think that's a really interesting point, and obviously we had a little bit of a technical glitch why it looks different here, but I guess the thing that we wanted to get back to talking about was how, Lego's been on all this journey of sort of creativity and storytelling, but at the end of the day, one of the things I really love is the transparency that, when you go to Lego House, you actually see the bricks being made, and you quite literally can get a brick hot off the injection mold, as it were. And so I wondered, could you talk a little bit about the importance of just bringing everything full circle and how kids don't just grow up with a box that comes off a shelf, a little bit like food. They engage with where it's, what it took to make that brick.
Yeah, I think so. If you look at how the brick is made and how it all starts with small pieces of plastic and how it evolves through molding machines and then eventually comes in bags and perfectly boxes with building instructions. There's obviously a long journey going there. But one of our most common bricks is the 2x4 brick. And really, it all really starts with that and the endless possibilities of just this brick. And even like if you have 6 of these, you can combine them in 915 million different ways. And that really goes to show how much you can do with just these essential bricks and system bricks and putting them together in different ways. But at the same time, we all know that there's so many other elements that the 2x4 brick. We have the minifigs with all their facial expressions and who add life to whatever construction you're making. And all these other elements that you can use in so many different ways. One of my favorite elements is this frog element. And it's sometimes used as a frog, but it can also be used as a lamppost. It can be used as, all kinds of things. And this is where it's really fun when you see elements that are used in different ways, in different constructions and in different contexts. But what really is exciting about the journey is that it really depends what the individual adds to it. It's at the end of the day, it is just a plastic brick that can stick together with its clutch power to another brick. And that in itself can be exciting, but it's really what you want to say with these bricks and these colors and how you want to express yourself that really makes the difference and what makes it engaging. And I think there is a big difference between following a building instruction and being able to express yourself with your own bricks and making your own creations. So it's really about finding that balance. I think the building instructions, they have a great potential in showing you what you can do. You're training also skills in being focused, and it's a very sort of meditative experience also following these instructions. But the Lego brick is so much more about that, and that's where Lego Masters Lego House comes into play, because it really shows this is what you can do without instructions. this is what you can do when you have no limits, and it's only yourself who set your limits and what you want to say.
I mean, I think that's such a great point to end on as well, of just, really Lego just encompassing that whole breadth of, as you said, the absolute craziness that it can achieve, of what any mind can do with unlimited resources. But as you said, the thing with Lego House, I really love that point that something can be very simple and still live on way after the experience, and that quite often it's really the emotion and the significance that we imbue the brick with that actually endures. So I think that's such a wonderful point to finish on. So thank you so much for taking us on a journey around so many different things. And I really can't thank you enough for taking the time in what I know is a really busy schedule right now. So it's been a pleasure.
It was great to talk to you as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again. Well, I'll see you around.
Okay, thanks. Thanks so much.
Bye.